This is the ultimate Timberland boot showdown because this style of boot is one of the most popular, iconic work boots of all time. It's also popular in New York, the streets of New York, but these are not all Timberlands because every work boot brand essentially has a Timberland knockoff because we've got the Timberland Pros, your more premium Timberlands, not the cheap ones that you can't be caught dead in New York City apparently, the Caterpillar lookalike, and the Walmart Herman Survivor version. So we already actually have cut every single one of these apart. And so in this video, we're gonna run them through all the tests, look at all the data, go piece by piece to figure out which of these Timberland-esque boots is the best, which is best for the price. Should you consider like a Walmart version over the higher end Timberland Pro? What's the difference between Timberland Pro and the Premium? What's good for work? What's good for casual? Is there any you should avoid? That's what we're gonna try to solve because this is a very requested video because of how many dudes work in this style of boot and love this style of boot. So what are the contenders? Well, for the most affordable, we've got the brand is Herman Survivor. The style is professional men's driller waterproof 6-inch steel toe work boots. They weigh 2 pounds, 3.4 ounces. They really retail for very affordable, $79.64. They're made in China. Next up, we've got the brand is Caterpillar or Cat. The style is a second shift steel toe work boot. They weigh 2 pounds, 1 ounce. They're a little bit more expensive at $114. Next up, we've got the brand is Timberland. The style is the premium 6-inch waterproof boot. They weigh 1 pound, 13.5 ounces. They retail for $210 when we, or now anyway, when we first did these, they were $198, so they've gone up 12 bucks, just so you know. They're made in the Dominican Republic. The final option is the men's direct attach 6-inch steel toe waterproof work boot. They retail for $170. So what we have here is basically from cheap to expensive, the more casual Timberland people still work in versus the actual work-oriented Timberland that most people work in if they know better than to buy these for work. So now start going through the details, starting with the leather first, because even though these look almost identical in leather, they are different in thickness and the quality. So starting with the Herman Survivors, this is a 2mm nubuck leather. And you know it's nubuck because if you look at the cross section, you can see there's still some of that grain in there and it's just slightly sanded to give it that microfiber look. And it can easily be faked with a fake leather, but a lot of times in a true leather, if it's this microfiber look rather than that really loose suede look, it's almost always a nubuck. But this cat leather is a little bit more conditioned. It doesn't quite feel as crispy and dry, and so that means over the long term, you're not gonna wear through them and you're not gonna split and crack them because of the moisture and the concrete dust that slowly works its way into the leather for construction. This Caterpillar leather is gonna last a little bit longer, if not a lot bit longer, but it's hard to say when these more affordable boots. But if you compare both these to the Timberland leather, I think this Timberland leather is the same leather on both these boots. Because you look at the cross section, they still have plenty of that grain. They're both 2mm thick. And you can see this leather doesn't absorb my spit or through the waterproof test nearly as much as these other two leathers. So I'm pretty sure that Timberland waterproofs their actual leather as well as having that waterproof lining. And out of the three, they're still very similar leathers, but this leather from Timberland seems like it's a little bit more premium. Is it enough to say I would never buy one of these for half the price solely because of the leather? No, I think it's a marginal difference. So honestly, all three of these are not terrible leathers. I would just rank it like the Timberland leather was best, then Cat, and then Herman Survivor from Walmart. These are micro adjust belts, handmade right here in the shop by us. Premium leather, solid brass hardware, and the rounded buckle so it doesn't dig in your gut all day. But what is micro adjust? Well, the one problem everyone always has with their belts is one hole's too tight, one's too loose. These little adjustments right here allow you to adjust your belt by 1/2 inch increments so it fits you exactly how you want for the lifetime of the belt. So check them out below. And then we did the waterproof test, and as you can see, here's the results. We did the puncture test, here's the results. Then if we look on the inside of the linings, the Herman Survivor is just a very typical, it's almost like a sneaker lining. It's backed with some foam. It looks like almost like a jersey material. No dedicated internal heel counter cover, so that's one of these fail spots of these more cheap boots is they use cheap lining and then your heel slips for a month or two, and next thing you know, you've worn through that lining. But it's not that crazy to see that type of lining in a sub $100 boot. Because if you compare it to the Cats have a very similar lining. They also don't have an internal heel counter cover, but it's a similar enough material. I don't think the Cats are gonna be that much more durable or dependable. The only advantage really that, to me, that Caterpillar has over the Herman Survivors is the lining itself and how it's made. Then if you look at the Premium Timbs, I like the Premium Timbs because you've got this leather lining up the shaft of the boot, and then the forefoot, you have that really abrasion resistant fabric lining we saw in like the Danners. We've seen it in a couple other boots where it's not like a fabric like this, or like a jersey material. it's like a pretty hardy, I don't even know what you describe it as. It's just a hardy material. The Pros have a very similar lining to the Herman Survivors and the Caterpillars. It's just a jersey style knit material, and in the forefoot under the vamp, it's just another fabric lining. At least the Pro has something that's clearly intentionally trying to make that area more durable compared to these other two. But I was surprised that the work boot didn't have a leather at least in the shaft of the boot. That surprised me. As for the insoles, the Herman Survivor is just a really, really cheap insole. The Cat insole is this weird material. It reminds me of Ultra Boost, almost like a styrofoam kind of consistency, like a better styrofoam. It's a really interesting, they call it Revive Tech. And it is comfortable. I actually like it a lot. It's maybe not gonna be the most durable, but it kind of bridges the gap between a closed cell foam and an open cell foam, because closed cell foam it's more supportive. It doesn't give you quite as much squish. It's a lot more durable in some instances. Whereas the open cell foam, it's more breathable. It compacts or like squishes better and faster. It's just a lighter foam. And so this kind of bridges the gap in a way that I haven't really seen before. It's an interesting insole. And Timberlands just have your classic insole. It's that hexagonal shape underneath. It gives you a little bit of extra squish. It's honestly mostly for looks, I'm sure. But you can see it's lined with that leather and that forefoot material, and same echoed in the Timberland Pros. Timberlands are better insoles, then Caterpillar, and then Herman Survivor. And we also did the ball drop test. Here's the results to back up some of that, and surprising results on the Caterpillar. That insole's interesting to me. But once we have those insoles removed, that's where we really start to see some of the differences in these boots, because the Herman Survivor is just that insole wrapped underneath, where that lining is wrapped under as well. The Caterpillars are the same way, but then you get to the Timberlands, and this is where the Timberlands are really different, not just how they're made, but how they feel, because both of these have a harder fiberboard underneath of the insole, and really the only difference between the Timberlands is the Premiums have a compressed cardboard on top, whereas the Pros do not. And so instead of that really soft, squishy material underfoot, you have a little bit more of a harder material. It's gonna break in slower, but it's gonna be more stable. The boot's not gonna be quite as tippy. But what about how they feel underfoot, how much squish they have, the support underfoot? It all comes through the midsole and the outsole. And the Herman Survivors are clearly an attempt to make an almost identical version to the Timberlands. But look at this, I didn't even notice this. I wonder if this split in between the recordings, because look at that big gap. There's no way that was there when I recorded it without noticing it, right? But yeah, similar concept, because you've got the harder rubber outsole with the softer foam midsole. The foam on the inside is about 25 Shore A. The rubber is about 60 Shore A. So about what you expect to see in a work boot. You know, the harder rubber is gonna be up at like 75 Shore A. So this, a little bit more squish, maybe not as durable, but you get a lot of squish from that really soft 25 Shore A midsole. But that's where you start to see the differences. It's not always in just the measurements, not just in the thicknesses and hardnesses, but how it's actually applied to the boot. Because if that failed on the shelf, imagine how it's going to perform out in the real world when you're actually working around concrete and water, corrosive chemicals. Good luck. Versus the Cat is more of a traditionally built boot, because instead of this because I think this is probably a glued construction. I doubt it's direct injected for this price point, especially since this midsole and outsole is just glued together. The Caterpillars are more of a traditional boot, where it's a Goodyear welt. You don't have that visible foam midsole on the outside, because a Goodyear welt, it just has a filler material, and then maybe some midsole. We'll see, we get it cut in half. But this proves the point of why stitching in more traditional boots is so important, because even if this midsole was separating from the outsole, that stitching still locks a lot of those materials together. But the one downside of it is you don't have that really soft, squishy midsole, because it's still a pretty tough outsole. It's still 65 to 70 Shore A. So it's not gonna be quite as squishy underfoot, but it's gonna be more stable. It's clearly gonna be more durable. And maybe the biggest advantage is you could take this to a cobbler and have it resoled. You know, it does have a synthetic welt, it does have some cheaper materials, but a lot more likely to resole this Cat compared to the Herman Survivors. Compare that to the Timberland Premiums. This is just I believe it's a glued construction, because it just has that polyurethane feeling outsole that is adhered to that fake welt. And if I remember right, there's like a patch of like recycled foam in the heel, and other than that, there's not a lot of squish in this boot. And so out of the bunch, this Timberland Premium is gonna be the most uncomfortable out of all of them, because the Timberland Pros, they basically took the Premiums and made it into a work boot by doing what Herman Survivor did, by adding a really soft, squishy midsole and a little bit harder outsole. And that midsole foam's a little bit harder to 40 Shore A, and the outsole itself is probably close to it's actually pretty tough. 75 short A. And so you get basically the best of all these combined into one boot, except for the cat. So now that's everything that we know from the outside. Let's cut them in half, do the reveal, see what's on the inside, and give these final rankings, which to avoid, which are better, where your money's best spent on these. So let's cut them in half. This is literally half a cow's worth of leather. I want to show you how flawed hides are just naturally because they used to be a live animal. So right here is just a little thin part in the hide. You can see some barbed wire scars on the belly, some big bug bites up here at the neck, but because it's scratch and dent, we can cut through all this. Little teeny cosmetic flaws, but still structurally sound, 30% off because they're scratch and dent. Check it out below. So let's see what's inside. So you can really see how close Herman Survivor tried to copy Timberland, which to me, I'm like, oh, come on guys, have a little bit of pride in your work. But what's interesting is I forgot that this Herman Survivor has a full-length steel shank, essentially like a puncture plate. And so it gives you a little bit of support, but also is very puncture resistant. Not that I would trust this boot because it's already delaminating, but at least it does have that going for it. And you can see it's very, very similar. One of the big differences is that you can see they filled up some of that void in the heel with a harder foam. I'm assuming to save on injection costs, you know, because that's just a cheap piece of foam versus this is probably a more expensive foam. But even the outsoles are very similar thicknesses. The construction above it's very similar. You've got the fiber board. And what's interesting about the Timberland Pros is you've got an integrated synthetic shank as the footbed. It runs all the way and tapers down to a point. And so you get that flexibility of a synthetic shank, but support of still having a shank. If I was really working in these really, really hard, I'd want a steel shank, but for most work, this is a fine shank, I think. But at the same time, you've got this huge bunching of material right at what is this, the pad of your big toe. Imagine standing on that all day. That is not a comfortable way to build a boot. And this is probably just a one-off flaw, but like you're paying twice the price as the Herman Survivors, and you'd think you wouldn't have these huge flaws in it. But, you know, out of the two of them, now that we've seen what's on the inside, which one's better? Clearly the Timberland Pros. Would I buy two of these for the cost of one of these? I think I would still gamble on one pair of Timberland Pros rather than two pair of Herman Survivors, just because of all the corners they cut. And if it's delaminating on the shelf, imagine how bad it's going to delaminate after a few weeks of wear. Then to the cat, you can see this is more of an affordable boot because there's no like cork filling on the inside that you see in like $250 and up boots. You still have a steel shank. You've got a fiberboard insole similar to the other two, but you can see now that it is truly a Goodyear welted construction. You can see how that ties into the insole, and you can see more what I meant by these aren't going to be quite as soft underfoot because you don't have all that foam that these other two do. And this boot's more similar to the Timberland Premiums because this one also doesn't have like a foam midsole. It's made to look like a Goodyear welt, but it's not. You can see it's all tucked under there, and it looks like it's direct injected together. I think I got that wrong. I think because you can see how that material's embedded into that midsole, and then there's that recycled foam in the heel. Not that that's a bad thing. You know, I think this is an example of cheapening out to use a different material to save some money. This is more than likely to give you just a little bit of squish and a little bit of light, add a little bit of, reduce some weight in the heel. Which of these is the absolute best work boot regards to price? The Timberland Pros. If you're gonna get one of these Timberland style boots, I would get the Pros. They're softer, they're gonna be more durable. You gotta watch out. Some flaws, you know, it's still an affordable work boot, but this has the comfort, has the durability, the more premium leather, it still has some semblance of an internal counter cover, and it just does everything better than any of the rest of these combined. What about, you know, if you're on a budget, you know, like you're in that sub $100 budget range of the Caterpillars and the Herman Survivors. Which is better out of these two? The Herman Survivors are gonna be more comfortable, but you're rolling the dice. I just don't have a lot of faith in Walmart boots, especially when they start delaminating on the shelf. But I think I would get the Cats. I think because it's a traditional construction, it's gonna be guaranteed more durable than this. It's not gonna be as soft underfoot, but personally for me, I'd rather lose a little bit of comfort, have a little more stability than gamble on a pair of $70 Walmart boots that might fail me in a few few weeks. So if I were to rank these in terms of best boot for work boots, I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. So is there any you should avoid? I just would avoid this one. I just have a really hard time gambling on anything with Walmart, especially with the footwear. We've seen how they do really terrible FUBU stuff. They do like half the work boots we've reviewed are really terrible, but they still can do some higher quality work boots like we've seen in the more premium stuff. But this is one I would avoid. So that should be all the information you need to make a decision about these. Let me know what you thought of this video. Is there any information we should have covered? Is there anything redundant? What other styles of this video do you want us to do? Because like I said, this is a very important style of video, not just for entertainment, but for actual real world value. Because people buy these kind of boots for a piece of equipment, to complete their job, to make money for their families. And when you have a boot that's delaminated on the shelf, you want to know that, and you want to know what's on the inside, and you want to know what you're spending your money on, and why you might want to spend twice the price on a pair of Timberland Pros versus half the price on a pair of Herman Survivors, because there is a clear and distinct difference across the board. So thank you guys for supporting this. Give it a like, give us a sub, because I want to do more of these because of the value they provide. So thank you guys. See ya.